I am Sundar. Like you mentioned, I lead product management and design at Intuit India. And I have to talk about Intuit. So very quickly, we serve three customers. We serve consumers with products like TurboTax and Mint for personal finance management. We serve small businesses and self-employed with our flagship product QuickBooks. And I think I'm going to take a leap of faith and say that this is a microcosm of all three segments that we serve. But that's about Intuit. I'll just quickly switch back to myself. I actually wanted to start with a confession. I am a orthosomniac. Anybody knows what an orthosomniac is? Looks like Saran is probably a fellow orthosomniac. I'll explain. Orthosomnia is someone who is so obsessed with sleep analytics, with gadgets like this. And yesterday I found a gadget called Dozy. You can put under your mattress and it tells you how well you sleep and heart rate and etc. etc. You're so obsessed with all of those analytics that you don't sleep very well. So I'm one of those. I am a gadget freak, and after finding out about Dozy, I have to go check it out tomorrow, right? But there is one more reason that I stay awake. There's something else that keeps me awake, which is that as a product manager, I know I've been in this journey for a while, but am I ready for tomorrow, right? And this is something that keeps evolving, and mainly because apparently the future is this, and I don't know if I'm ready for this future yet, right? And I think Somu talked about 1980s, but I actually want to go a little further back. And apparently, it's always useful to, before you look forward, it's always useful to go back and look at where all this started. And this is from Mind the Product. Apparently, back in 1930s, there's a guy called Neil McElroy at Procter & Gamble who wrote the first memo. Effectively, that's the first written record of product management. He wrote a memo to make a case for people who will go talk to customers and come back and build. And I've been there are different stages where I've had to convince my CEO that, hey, I need to go higher, and what's a product manager? I have to explain what a PM does, all of that. He was apparently one of the first to do. That's where it started. He wrote this thing he called them the brand men, or it was not gender inclusive at the time, brand men and women, who are essentially people who go talk to customers, come back, and they are responsible for the entire brand, from advertising, marketing, go to sales, to testing and everything else. Fast forward a few years, he inspired a few others, Hewlett and Packard. They took this ethos even further and defined the HP way, the Hewlett Packard way of doing product management. I'm not going to bore you with all you can Google this, but I'm going to fast forward a few more years and get to the 90s when I started my journey, where Scrum, extreme programming, all of this took over, and then Agile Manifesto took over. But when I reflect back, and if I cut through all the jargon that we sort of imbibed as part of the process, the fundamentals were actually similar. I think what Agile Manifesto emphasized is, as a product manager, your job is to co-innovate, collaborate with your customers on one hand. On the other hand, co-innovate and collaborate with your engineers. And that's, if you look at it, that's sort of what Brandman was about as well. Oops, I need the back. So if the last decade or so, we have taken this even further in terms of lean, in terms of tools and tips and tricks to innovate even faster. But that's sort of been the ethos. Now, if I look at where is this headed, and I really need the slide now. Where is this headed? A couple of years ago from McKinsey. When I saw an article from McKinsey, I thought the time for PMs has arrived. Who thought McKinsey would write an article which talks about the role of a product manager now and how is it evolving? And this is a couple of years ago. This, and there was one more event, which is a similar event, a Hindi movie where Ranbir Kapoor was called a product manager. These two events told me that we have arrived. And since then, of course, we have product managers who have gone on to become CEOs, like folks here. But anyway, I'm digressing, but I'll go back to the McKinsey article. Actually, before that, I just want to make a quick point. If you look at the Intuit history, the whole story started in 1980s. And it's actually not a coincidence if you look at the product management journey and this, because Scott Cook, the founder, one of the founders, actually was a product manager from Procter & Gamble. He was one of those product managers who was there in FMCG, because a lot of those product managers at the time were FMCG product managers. he saw his wife struggling to keep the check register balanced day in and day out. And he thought, there must be a better way. I do this day in and day out at my work, yes, with a different hat, but there must be a better way to do it. And that led to Quicken with our very first product. And rest is history. We have invented multiple times. We have from the era of DOS to Windows to web to mobile, and now the future in the era of AI. But very quickly, I just want to go back to what McKinsey said. McKinsey says that the role of a PM will evolve with a deeper focus on data, without losing empathy for users. And I'm really, really glad they added that thing in the bracket, because I'll talk about the pitfalls of drinking the Kool-Aid called AI/ML very quickly, right? So the deeper focus on data, but not losing empathy for your users. They also talked about, apparently, if we are not already, we are all analytics gurus. We know how to slice and dice data. There are a few more things which sounded scary, so removed. Apparently, we should also know how to spin a Hadoop cluster on AWS. So I thought, I'm going to delete that, use a little bit of editorial privilege. But then we will also be adept at machine learning concepts. So that's, this article was around 2 years ago, and this is here and now, right? But I can see this happening even more. There are more such instances. For instance, Udacity, and you have 4 more days. I think this is 5, but now it's 4 more days to enroll to this course. Udacity has just launched a course specifically AI for PMs. You've seen many courses on AI, generic courses across Udemy, pick any platform. But this is, from what I know, this is the first course which actually looks at AI for PM. And it actually says that build skills that help you compete in the new AI-powered world, right? So that's academia. And IPL and the PLF is part of this journey, right? And helping us equip ourselves. Because no matter where you are in your career journey, you have to keep reinventing yourself. If you look at corporations, there you go. This is, on the left-hand side, what you see is how Intuit used to define PM competencies. And that's how I used to get measured. Every PM used to get measured. That's how we hired. And you'll see that there is no specific call-out called data or AI. What you see on the right is where we are headed to. It's still in the evolution, but that's where we're headed to. I'm not expecting you to read all of that, but I just want to highlight one big line there. It says, understand the how of data and AI so that you can apply it to the what. And the what here is the problem that you're trying to solve. And you don't have to be a data scientist. You don't have to be a data science engineer, but you need to know the how behind how this works so that you can actually partner with them to build the right products. So think of it, McKinsey said it, so it must be true. Academia is already reacting to it. Companies like Intuit are responding to it. So I should sleep well, right? Not quite, because I'll talk about some examples, and I think history is littered with, at least the last few decades has been littered with this problem, which is sometimes clickers don't work. There you go. Which is, I have a model, do you have a problem? I don't know how, again, honestly, how many people have put the cart before the horse? I have. And this you see again and again, because again, I'll give you an example, right? I have about 15 product managers in my team. Every quarter we call out a day called a learning day, and we say we are going to invest in upskilling ourselves. So we said, let's split into 3 teams. Each of us, we know where QuickBooks is today. We know what the market is like. Let's go figure out big problems to solve and come up with solutions. And I was the judge, so I was not part of any of these 3 teams. So I was just watching how the solutioning was evolving, and none of them knew what each of the teams were doing. But it was really, really fascinating to see how the 3 teams coalesced into something very, very similar. One team said, our idea is to use AI/ML to score our vendors. Second team said, we use AI/ML to score our customers. The third team said, our idea is to use AI/ML to score our employees. All 3 are great problems. I'm not diminishing the value of each of those 3 ideas, but it was just amazing that 3 teams completely, given the same set of data, somehow there is this kida in your brain that, there is this cart before the horse problem that it can happen to the best, right? So it was a wake-up call that there are so many, if I force people, there are so many other problems we could have picked, which had nothing to do with AI/ML, right? There are real problems here and now that we could have solved, but it so happened. And this happens time and again. I was talking to someone in our Intuit AI team. She was saying that it's really difficult to figure out how we can add value to the business units. And a data scientist in my team has built deep learning models, and I'm hoping that it'll get consumed. I was like, that's the wrong way to look at it, because I think the dance between PM and data is still evolving. We're still trying to figure out how to dance together. Sometimes they are one step ahead, sometimes we are one step ahead. And this whole thing that I've built models and somebody please consume it seems just the wrong way to do it. So at Intuit, we have this phrase which called that, and Scott Cook talks about this all the time, which is fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Because as engineers, many of us are engineers, and I've done this many times in my past as well, and still do. It's just so tempting to jump towards the solution before understanding what the real problem is. So that is something very, very important to keep in mind as you're thinking around AI/ML. The other one is, this is my attempt at, and before that, so one is in understanding, really understanding the problem. The second is understanding what problems can be solved best by AI/ML. So we have a session, I think, later today with the Intuit AI team. Will give you sort of a framework. So I don't want to steal their thunder. They'll give you a sort of framework to look at, you have a problem, great. I'm hoping you understand the problem really well. But now let's look at whether this problem can be best solved with AI/ML. Not every problem needs AI/ML, right? We tend to think like that way, but not necessarily. So that is something, again, I won't go into deep into it, but there's a session later today. There's another issue, which is, this is my attempt at a data science joke. You need to know when to stop. You need to know when precision is important. You need to know when recall is important. You need to know what metrics you're solving for. Which of these two parameters are more important when you're building a machine learning model? You need to know when to stop, because you may already have enough data, and you can always spend 3 more months to get more data. You may not have a cold start problem. You may already have the data. So you need to know when to stop, or you need to know when to start. You need to know what's the right model, because I believe the latest and greatest is something called multi-layered neural network. Keep me honest. But you don't necessarily need MTNN for every single data problem. So understanding, and that's why you need to understand the how behind, going back to the competency, understand the how behind data and AI, so that you can work with your data science partners and ensure that you have the metrics clearly defined, you know what models you're using, you know when to stop. The last one I want to talk about is the heartbeat of a data science problem is it's not necessarily always the same as how we are trained. In the Scrum methodology, it kind of trains you into thinking that you can take any big problem, chunk it up into 2-week sprints, boom, 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 you can deliver something tangible every sprint. The machine learning world doesn't necessarily work that way. I'll give you an example. We have a thriving business called QB Capital, or QuickBooks Capital. This is Intuit lending to small businesses to make them successful, right? And the overarching hypothesis, the leap of faith here is that we know better about our customers. We can assess risk better than your average bank down the street. So we can lend to customers who generally get shunned away by big banks. But that's a big leap of faith. We don't have a model. So we have to build a model. So we have to actually start lending to figure out, and start building the model, prime the machine. And over a period of time, tweak it to a point where now we are confident enough that we open it up to everybody. So if you go apply the same yardsticks of Scrum and Agile, it won't cut it, because you need to really have appetite for a 6-month journey or a 1-year journey. Again, just want to recap. If you are, the 3 things if you want to walk away with is, 1, understand what problem you're solving. Don't fall in love with the solution. Think whether these problems are really solvable by AI/ML, but not all of them are. Think about when to stop, know when to stop, know the real nuts and bolts. You don't have to be a data scientist, but know the nuts and bolts enough to know what model to pick and when to stop. And have an appetite, and you may have to unlearn some of the skills you have learned in that Scrum era when you're working with data scientists, so that you get this dance, as I call it, with the data scientist right. Having said that, there is good news. It's not that doom and gloom. It's not, we will react, because if you look at it, the fundamentals remain the same. The fundamentals remain the same because you first need to know where to go, and you need to figure out how to get there. And this is exactly what the Brandman Manifesto or the memo that Neil McElroy wrote is I want people who will figure out where to go and then figure out how to get there. And at Intuit, we call this customer-driven innovation, which is identify a problem that's worth solving, that you are best placed to solve better than anybody else. That's number one. And then what we use something called design for delight to go figure how to solve that problem, where you start with understanding the customer really well, start with rapid experimentation. Here again, you may take a machine learning problem, chunk it up and say, let's start collecting data. Let's go with the model version A, iterate. 6 months later, we've figured out how to solve this problem. Yes, we can now lend to anybody who wants capital, right? So I know I started by saying that I don't sleep very well, but I lied. I do sleep very well. That's what actually the data says. I need to check today. I didn't check today's. I do sleep very well because I know that forums like PLF are there for a reason, right? The forums and product managers have, just like the products that we build, we have iterated ourselves, we have equipped ourselves over a period of time. We know that we will do that again, and this could be AI, the era of AI today, it could be something else tomorrow. But forums like these are great opportunities to learn, network, and I'm looking forward to today and tomorrow and there are so many sessions focused on exactly data-driven product management and using AI, etc., to learn this dance better. I'm going to become one of these members, and hopefully many of you will become members as well, because this has to be not a once a year event. It has to be more frequent so that we can learn from each other. Because I'm pretty sure folks in the audience have your own examples of putting cart before the horse, and we can share from each other. So yeah, so I'm pretty confident that I am equipped for today, and I will equip myself for tomorrow. I do sleep very well. So thank you.